Senate Bill 951?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Give your attention to Senate Bill 951, Senator Surovell.
Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 951 has to do with fracking. I'm not sure if the committee has the Agriculture Committee amendments in front of it. The bill originally as introduced was a ban on hydraulic fracturing in the eastern groundwater management area, which is basically the area east of I-95. The Ag Committee put a 4-year sunset on it, so it's basically now a 4-year moratorium instead of a ban. So the committee has an understanding the eastern groundwater management area has had a lot of problems. DEQ recently put an underground water management plan because the aquifer has been going down at an unsustainable level, and they've had to put limits on drilling groundwater wells. A lot of homes east of 95, the only source of water is groundwater because the water in the main rivers out there is brackish. And in the Northern Neck area, 84,000 acres of that has been put under lease for fracking. And also the Middle Peninsula as well. There's a Texas-based company that put it under lease for fracking. And I think everybody knows that's basically you pump a bunch of chemicals down the ground, break the shale rock up, and then gas comes out. While there haven't been any fracking problems in Virginia, there have been fracking issues in other parts of the country, including wells being spoiled, groundwater being messed up, explosions, chemical releases, things like that. There are 4, and the shale is known as the Taylorsville Basin Shale. In light of this, there's actually 4 localities that have already banned fracking in that area. There's Augusta County was actually the first in the state to ban it, but in that area we had King George County, Westmoreland County, Richmond County have all banned fracking, and Essex County has language they put in their comprehensive plan to make it very difficult. But the problem is basically if we have one leak of this stuff into our groundwater, we're going to spoil an aquifer for potentially millions and millions of people, and we can't take that risk. And so basically this bill now just has a moratorium so we can take a deep breath and be more careful about this before we allow it to happen. The last thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, I don't think the committee had the benefit of the financial impact statement, which came out, I believe, this afternoon.
Right.
Came out and said the financial impact is 0. And I just handed out a copy to everybody. And so given the financial impact 0, and this has already been vetted for policy, I assume you'll just send this to the floor.
Okay, Senator Norment.
Thank you. I just was curious, having the privilege of toiling in local government for 4 years, you tweaked my interest when you said that some had been able to include in their comprehensive plan some language that perhaps would have retarded the ability to do this fracking. Why can't we leave that up to each locality to determine how they want to handle it?
Mr. Chairman, I would say to Senator Norment that we could do that, and also localities can also change their mind. And part of the problem with this is that this resource is a common resource that's shared by about the eastern groundwater management area. The aquifer is a resource that's shared by probably at least 3 dozen counties. And if one county chooses to allow it to happen and it spoils the resource for everybody, that's, I think, more of a statewide concern than a local concern. I mean, the localities, obviously, what happens above ground is more their problem, but what happens below ground affects everybody. And so that's how I'd respond to that.
Okay. Senator Earl, as you're aware and as you alluded to, the policy decision was discussed in the Agriculture Conservation Committee, and we try to keep ourselves confined to the fiscal implications, but sometimes we stray from that. It's been represented to me that that some would consider this an economic taking because there are contracts in place.
I'm happy to talk about that.
Do you want to talk about that, or you have people here to speak to that?
No, I'm happy to talk about it. We talked about that in the Agriculture Committee, but I would submit that there is no taking here at all. The government has not granted a right to anybody to do anything. There's not a single license that's been issued. The government hasn't given anybody the thumbs up. We have leases that have been issued that were speculative leases issued on something that may or may not happen in the future, and that happens all the time. And if you look at takings law, the last 2 cases the U.S. Supreme Court came down on that would relate to this, one was Lucas, and that came down in 1992. Lucas case had to do with a beachfront lot in South Carolina where the federal government basically said you can't even build a house on it after a guy paid $1 million for it. And the Supreme Court said that's a taking because you've completely devalued the property. This doesn't devalue anybody's property. You can still have timber, you can have cows, you can put a house on it, you can do whatever you want. The second case is it was a case involving Penn State Railroad Station in 1978, and in that situation, the Penn Station, they want to put it 20 stories on top of their Manhattan Railroad station. The New York Historical Commission said you can't. The United States Supreme Court said taking away the 20 stories isn't a taking because you're still allowing them to do what they're using the property for. They can still have a train station, they can rent it, they can sell food, they can have trains going in and out. That ain't a taking. Taking has to be a much more significant act than that. And I don't think there's, also I would point out that there's several other states that have done this. New York State banned fracking. Maryland did a 2-year moratorium. They banned it last year. This has happened in many other states, and no court in this country has found this constitutes a taking.
Okay. All right, since this has been heard previously, another committee will limit testimony to just a small amount, but is there anyone here to speak to the bill in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief. I'm Brian Hoffman, live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and here on behalf of Friends of the Rappahannock. We are very much in favor of this bill, working throughout the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula and the entire Rappahannock River watershed, which the chairman represents portions of, Senator Vogel, of course, Senator Stewart and McDougal. These localities have already taken steps over the past 5 years. They've had ample opportunity to have public comment from their citizens and leaseholders, and have ultimately come to the decision to severely restrict or ban these activities because they care about their natural resources and their rural economies. So I think that this is a great opportunity for your committee to move this bill on and pass. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. In favor? Brief, just very brief statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pat Calvert, Virginia Conservation Network. We're in favor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Trias Lockwood with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, and we support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, anyone here in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, David Clark, representing the Virginia Oil and Gas Association. We do oppose this bill. We think it is unnecessary. We also think that it sends the wrong message from the Commonwealth that we're going to ban a legitimate business practice that has proven to be safe, including in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I will respectfully disagree with the patron regarding whether this is a taking or not, because natural gas is a property right in Southwest Virginia and other parts of the state. Historically, property owners have received significant royalty payments from their natural resources. It's a property right that we believe this legislation would infringe upon and would result in claims against the Commonwealth for a taking. I will point out that just a few years ago, this body dealt with the uranium issue where there was a moratorium in place that currently is still in litigation as to whether that is a taking or not. And I also would point out that, as the patron mentioned, New York has a ban, but just recently a case was filed in New York challenging the constitutionality of that ban, and we believe that this is something that not only is unnecessary, but it would open the Commonwealth to claims for compensation for a property taking. Thank you.
Excuse me. As a question, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, you made a statement that this has been safely done throughout the Commonwealth?
No, well, Southwest Virginia.
Okay, Southwest Virginia. It has not been done in the region of the Potomac Aquifer, has it?
Mr. Chairman, I will say that in the early 80s, there were some test wells drilled in the area of the aquifer, and they were done by ExxonMobil or one of the larger producers. I don't know for sure which one, and they were safely done. Those were test wells. Don't know the results of those. We do believe there is some gas in that area, but we do not believe that anyone is prepared to go into that area and drill. And I would just point out to you the reason we think that's not likely to happen is because all you have to do is go up into Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and every time you put a drill bit in the ground, you have an almost certainty of a big return on your investment for your drilling. It's unproven in Eastern Virginia and acknowledged to be an environmentally sensitive area, so we don't believe that it's likely that anyone's going to go in there. But we would oppose this as a moratorium because it's a bad precedent. We think it sends a bad signal to the Commonwealth, to the business community, to the rest of the country. We also think that it's likely to be something that other parts of the state would say, well, why not us as well? And that would be very damaging to the industry, and we think to the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I believe the committee, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Myles Martin with the Virginia Petroleum Council. I want to briefly address just one issue that's been brought up, and that is the uniqueness of the aquifer in that area. And I have a map, a USGS map of the aquifers in the United States. And you can see the yellow aquifer that runs along the southeast is a coastal plain aquifer. And you can see it covers almost the entire landmass of Louisiana and about a quarter of the landmass of Texas, where a whole lot of shale drilling is done about 10,000 feet down. So while this hasn't been done in the northern neck of Virginia, that type of geology is very familiar territory for the oil and gas industry and is not something that we should base a ban off of.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Nolan with McGuire Woods on behalf of CNX Resources, and we also oppose the bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Surovell, you want to wrap it up, then we'll see.
Sure,
what the
absolutely.
committee-
I would just point out Pennsylvania and West Virginia are a different shale, completely different geology, completely different aquifer, totally different issue, nothing to do with this. Number two, this is a 4-year moratorium. And the moratorium, it was made a moratorium, not a ban, and Senator Peterson actually made the motion because of the concern about the taking. As you just heard them say, this is completely unproven. I don't know how something unproven could be a taking. That just isn't how taking law works. So it isn't a taking. If anybody wants to read it, I have a 97-page article from the University of Delaware or Denver Law School about why fracking is not a taking. A fracking ban is not a taking. So
Okay. All right, thank you, Senator Surovell. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion to report, is there a second to that? Motion properly supported to report bill, that is Senate Bill 951. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, open the roll.
Roll is open, sir.
Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 8, noes 8.
Ayes 8, noes 8. The bill fails to report, Senator Surovell.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.